UFP, the United Federation of Podcasts.
Welcome to Franchise Fatigue, the little podcast on the United Federation of Podcasts Network, where my good friend Zach and I cover all the films in a movie franchise, and our very first franchise is rapidly coming to the current end. As we talked about in our last episode, there's going to be a couple more. We're covering Mission Impossible right now, and I couldn't do it without my ever-constant nemesis, Zach Moore. How are you doing, my friend?
Hey, Brandon. I'm excited to talk about Rogue Nation, a Mission Impossible story.
I'm very upset that you didn't try and do something from the film that I could ruin.
I decided to stop doing that. You just talk right through it, and you're like, "Whoa, let's get into it now." Like, no, that was a quote from the movie, but we're okay. We'll work on that. See ya.
Okay,
Brandon and I haven't. We don't podcast together very much, so we got to work on our chemistry.
We got to work on our chemistry. I think we got pretty good chemistry. We've had a lot of positive feedback.
That was a joke.
Yeah, I took a picture. I was on our Spreaker website. And I was taking a look at our downloads and whatnot, and see if I can find it. So I just want to give a shout out to a few people. So of our listeners, 74% of our listeners are in the United States. Is that the U.S. theme song?
No, it's a Stars and Stripes Forever by John Philip Sousa, which you would know if you watched Star Trek Next Generation Season 3, Episode 1, Evolution. But go on.
Canada has 13%. We have about 9% of our listeners in the UK. 3% of our listeners are coming from Sweden. And we had probably one listener in Ireland.
Oh, Ireland. So, thanks for listening.
Yeah, thanks, guys. We have a very narrow list of people. That's actually the entirety of like all of our downloads are coming from those countries.
So we got to work on Africa, Asia, Australia.
Yeah, South America.
South America.
Like 90% of the planet is not.
Are you telling me no one in Antarctica listens to our show?
Yeah, I know. Like, what the heck?
What else is there to do there? I mean,
well, we need to cover the thing. If we covered the thing, then the people in Antarctica would listen.
It counts because there's 3 of them. So.
And Las Vegas is the biggest city for downloads with 11.69%. So, Trabuzio, I know that's you. And I'm guessing that's Amy Nelson as well from last week. So you guys there are covering the majority of our downloads for cities. So thank you, everybody. We do truly appreciate everybody for listening. And we're glad you're enjoying the show. And tonight we're talking about Mission Impossible Rogue Nation, which is the 5th movie in the franchise.
That's right, Brandon. But, we did have some breaking news in our last podcast, which is all going to be hopelessly out of date, right? But there was there was an announcement by Chris McQuarrie, like, missions accepted, and we kind of speculated on what that was. And literally, like, later that night or the next day, I think they officially announced that they're going to make Mission Impossible 7 and 8. They're filmed back-to-back. They're coming out in 2020 and 2021. And I'm very excited for them because Christopher McQuarrie, spoilers, does some great Mission Impossible movies, and of course Tom Cruise leading the way again. So I'm very excited that this franchise will continue. So even though when we wrap up this conversation in a couple weeks with Mission Impossible Fallout, we will revisit it when it returns.
So now I got to ask you then, because this is a whole new rule for our show. So are we just going to, if we've covered a franchise and then another one happens to come out, are we just going to cover that new installment?
I would like to. Because it would feel would feel incomplete without it. It's like, well, we got to wait until there's a couple more. I don't want to have to wait until there's like 2 or 3 more.
Well, I'm just glad then that you don't think we have to do all of the movies in that franchise again.
No, we're not doing that. So.
Okay, so yeah, when Mission Impossible 7 comes out, we'll just add it into the queue and we'll just do Mission Impossible 7. And then we'll say refer to episodes 1 to 6. Sounds good?
Sounds good to me.
Okay, excellent. Right on. But before we get to Mission Impossible 7, we got to get to Mission Impossible 5. And Zach, I'm going to guess that you've got some trivia for us.
I have quite a bit of trivia for this film, Mission Impossible Rogue Nation. as it's called. And actually, that subtitle, Rogue Nation, caused a bit of conflict between Paramount and Disney, which at the same time that this film was coming out, had announced its Star Wars spinoff, Rogue One, a Star Wars story, hence my kind of joke about it off the top.
Oh, I get it now. Not funny.
So they actually cut a deal. They said in exchange for use of the title, Disney wouldn't promote or release any promotional materials for its own film until Paramount's film was released. So I thought that was an interesting kind of handshake agreement, that there wouldn't be any overlap. But really, though, it's like, are people going to confuse Rogue Nation, Mission Impossible with Rogue One, Star Wars? I don't know. But moving on from that, another...
I don't know, man. I can't handle like Star Trek on TV and in the theaters at the same time. I'm just not bright.
It's just too confusing. Which crew is this? But
which crew is this?
Another aspect of Star Wars and Mission Impossible, interacting in the movie theater and causing changes to be made, is the original release date for Rogue Nation was Christmas 2015. However, they pulled it forward to July of that same year to avoid competition with Spectre, which came out that November, and then, of course, Star Wars Episode 7, which came out that December. So I think that was a wise decision on the part of Paramount to move Mission Impossible up to the summer.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the producers originally wanted Brad Bird to return from Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol, but he turned them down in order to direct Tomorrowland. So I don't know if you made the right choice there, Brad. And apparently Brad Bird, as I've heard, it's my understanding that he also turned down directing The Force Awakens to do Tomorrowland. So there you have it. But Christian McQuarrie was then brought in at Tom Cruise's request, because that's this would be the fourth film now that Tom Cruise had worked on with him. He worked with 3 previously: Valkyrie, Jack Reacher, and Edge of Tomorrow. Those are movies that McQuarrie had either written or directed. So they had an established relationship there. Tom Cruise was actually attached to star as Napoleon Solo in the Man from U.N.C.L.E. Movie version, but dropped out in order to do this film. Ironically, his replacement, Henry Cavill, would be in the next Mission Impossible film, Mission Impossible Fallout. So all these spy actors kind of stick to the same genres, it seems. So
is that character related to Han Solo?
No, he's related to Napoleon Bonaparte. That's also incorrect. Anyway, moving on. Returning characters that did not return. Paula Patton from Ghost Protocol and Maggie Q from Mission Impossible 3 were both set to reprise their roles, but they dropped out of the project due to scheduling conflicts. So I really miss Paula Patton. Like I said, she had become my favorite female lead in the franchise as of the 4th film, so I missed her in this film. Maggie Q really was kind of a non-factor, I think, in the 3rd one, so not much of a loss there, but it would be nice to see Paula Patton again. And hey, we could still see those characters in 7 and 8, because as far as we know, they're still alive. Benedict Cumberbatch was the first actor considered to play the villain. I think people are just waiting for him to play a Bond villain or a Mission Impossible villain. I think he'd be perfect as one.
Yeah, totally.
He's as we know, he's kind of his bread and butter is like an intimidating voice, and of course, playing Khan, playing Smog.
He was Khan?
Yeah. Well, he was John Harrison. That's another debate.
Oh,
but
yeah, that's right.
Anyway, Sean Harris, who did end up getting the lead villain role, he agreed to appear as the villain Solomon Lane on the condition that his character was killed off because he didn't want to be in any sequels. But while they were working on the movie, McQuarrie and Cruise agreed they couldn't find a way to wrap up his character in a satisfying way, so they decided to save him and bring him back in the next one. So, so sorry, Sean.
I know that guy from what is it, Prometheus?
Yes, he is one of the guys in Prometheus that the really stupid astronauts that get killed by the worm alien at the beginning. Also,
he's much more presented in this. Like he's like he doesn't look so sloppy in this one.
He looks in that the way he looks in Mission Impossible Fallout. Also, I know him. He's in Harry Brown, which is basically it's like Death Wish but with Michael Caine. Which is an interesting movie I recommend to people, but he has a small role in that as well, where he also looks very disheveled. So this is the most put together and prim and proper I've seen. I've seen Sean Harris, but Jessica Chastain was the first choice to play Elsa, but she declined because she didn't want to work out and train for 6 months because that's what's involved in these kind of roles, right? And it's actually the second time she turned down starring with Tom Cruise. She turned down Oblivion as well. So Rebecca Ferguson was unanimous as the second choice, and Cruise and McQuarrie liked her from her work on The White Queen, which is a movie that came out a couple years before this. I've not seen it. This is my introduction to Rebecca Ferguson, and she's gone on to riding the stardom of this franchise from there. So Michael Giacchino could not return.
Giacchino.
I never say it right. I call him Michael G. So it's Giacchino.
Giacchino.
All right, it's not that complicated, I guess. When you say it like that. But anyway, he had.
I used to say it wrong too, so it's no big deal.
Right.
I just figured it out afterwards.
Michael G. Brother of Kenny G, did not return to compose this film because he had a scheduling conflict with Jurassic World, which he was doing at the same time. So Joe Kramer came in and did the score. Tom Cruise himself was injured 6 times during the course of this movie. He did a lot of his own, as we know, right? He did a lot of his own stunts himself. He did the hanging onto the airplane stunt without the use of visual effects or a stunt double. And at times he was suspended on the aircraft for 5,000 feet up in the air, which is crazy. I mean, of course, they digitally painted out like there were basically like wrist cuffs for him to be attached to the plane, and there were a lot of precautions that were digitally painted out, right? But he was attached to that plane, and it shows. And they really showcased that. That was the big showcase in all the trailers. It's in the cold open of the movie, and they also have it again in the end credits, right, where they credit Tom Cruise. So they got their money's worth out of that stunt. Speaking of stunts,
did you know how many times he did that stunt?
No, how many times?
7.
7 times. I do know it took 10 days to film that 90-second scene. So,
yeah, he did that 7 times. He was on the outside of that plane because he's like, I want to make sure that they get it. And it's fun because they have some of the bonus features on the Blu-ray, and they're talking about it, and they're all like, the least of our concerns was him falling off of this plane. We were worried about things like birds hitting him and, stuff going through his eye.
Right.
So he had like these thick contacts on his eyes to protect his eyes, but he couldn't see anything. Like, oh my goodness, that man is just insane.
Is this your favorite Tom Cruise stunt of them all?
I don't know. Like, this is really good. Like, let's hold that off for when we get into the movie.
Okay.
We'll hold that off for our discussion.
We'll put a pin in that.
Yeah.
Now, speaking of stunts, the stunt coordinator told both Simon Pegg and Tom Cruise that they were going to do their own stunts, especially Tom Cruise, as far as driving stunts go, I should say, because Tom Cruise is apparently the best driver of all the stunt drivers, because he had really become really great at driving these cars and these car chases. So, and there's some continuity in both from the original series and the movie franchise here. This is the first Mission Impossible film which every member of Ethan Hunt's team had been in a previous film, so we have a complete veteran team here for the IMF. And then Ethan's codename Bravo Echo 11 was the same codename he used in the first Mission Impossible film.
Well, that whole sequence
in the phone booth,
a callback. Like everything that he said when he got in the phone booth was what he said in the first movie. They were just showing it from the other side, like rather than showing him in the phone booth, they were showing the guy on the other side of the line.
It was a great callback because it's like some mission that had gone terribly wrong, and he bloodily stumbles over to a phone booth and makes the call.
Yeah.
So, but there were also some callbacks to the original series of Mission Impossible, because Ethan receives his first mission on a vinyl record, and this is one of the first ways that the agents receive missions in the Mission Impossible show. Also, the Syndicate were a regular antagonist of the Mission Impossible show, and they were actually teased at the end of the last film, as you said in our last podcast, Ghost Protocol. So,
that's cool. I didn't know they were part of the original show. That's awesome.
Yeah, and that's the first time they've really taken any, other than Jim Phelps being a character in the first film. That's the really only other direct carryover from the actual television show to the movies. And speaking of Jim Phelps, this is the first Mission Impossible film where the main villain is not killed at the end. So, and then there's a little bit of trivia about the masks, but I'll save that for our mask out at the end. So there you have it.
Excellent. Awesome. Right on. Well, that's some great trivia, and I think we should just jump right into the discussion. Let's start off with, there's a lot of really great stuff in this movie, and I think we should just start right at the beginning with the plane sequence. And that, while you had asked me earlier if I think that's my favorite stunt or not, and I don't think that it is yet, I still think that I preferred the climbing on the outside of the building, because I really don't like heights. So I can really appreciate that, and I can really appreciate like how difficult that would have been. Yes, I understand that he's on a plane and it's also flying in the air, right? And he's going up in a height. But it's just the idea of being stuck on the outside of this building is really pretty amazing to me, and I really like that. But